if you play Star Wars Battlefront 1 or Star Wars Battlefront 2015, you know that defense is extremely overpowered. And you know that defense is the main strategy that rules supreme in this game. And I'm going to explain why. I'm going to try and make this video under an hour long, but in the case where I'm unable to, this might be a two-part video. So do be aware of that. Now, I first want to explain, this is dedicated to HVV, so, yeah, we're not really talking about the bigger game modes, because heroes and villains affecting the bigger game modes, it is a completely different ballpark and meta in those modes. It is completely different there. Also, we're mostly going to be talking about which characters heavily benefit from defense, and which ones actually exemplify the defensive playstyle. Now, if you play against a really good defensive team, so Coiler, I can't really think of anybody else because every other defensive team me and my group have beaten at least once. Lab can be okay on defense, but Lab's problem is that Lab himself isn't really good at the game, and he often needs to be carried by other people. And communication with his team is often a mess. So usually if I pick somebody on defense, it's usually going to be Coiler, because they pretty much scrim and play defensively every other day, as far as I know. So they probably have a few thousand hours in just camping their spawns alone. So I'm mostly going to be using them as an example, because those are the players that you will probably be encountering the most, Electronic T and friends. And those are the players you are going to be seeing play defense the most. It isn't exclusive to them, it's just those are the players that play the most consistent on defense. Every other group you will see play defense except ours. There are some extremely circumstantial factors that will make us camp. It has to be extremely circumstantial. And I can only name of 2 recent games where our team has been forced to camp. And those games are a Sulphur Fields game where a extremely terrible Darth Vader forced to camp our spawn as Imperials, and a Swamp Crash Site game where same thing happened. An extremely terrible Boba Fett made us camp. We had to camp behind the trees for most of the game, and it was absolutely horrific and boring because we had to out-camp campers, and it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had on this game. So, and it might be weird that I, an offensive player, am commenting on defense, because I usually don't play defense. But I've been playing this game enough to know defense well enough to be able to break it down into a level that is easier to understand. And as somebody who fights defense every other day, or did fight defense every other day, I think I know enough about it for my opinion to be relevant. So there we go. We're first going to be talking about the maps. Now, I'm going to try my best to not turn this into a set piece of why a large majority of these maps suck. But I'm going to quickly comment on which maps Lando is good on, and which maps are really good for Chewbacca. Because this is really, really relevant, because on the maps where Chewbacca is good and he can camp indoors and completely nullify his offensive weaknesses, then you are going to see Chewbacca used 100% of the time. Maps where Lando can be used offensively and defensively, mostly offensively, because Lando is a huge offensive threat in this game. You will likely see either 100% usage out of Lando, or you'll see 100% usage out of Luke, or you might even see both, because Luke is often a substitute for Lando if you go against players that don't play Lando. So there's that. I'll also be talking about which maps are good for Imperials, but it's not exclusive to certain characters, since Vader, Emperor, Bossk, for the most part, is a universally used team. It can be interchangeable, but for the most part, Bossk is so good that, yeah, while Boba Fett does have a really good niche, Bossk is often too important to get rid of. Oh my goodness. As is Vader and Emperor, because, well, for starters, you need Vader to soak up massive amounts of damage, and you need a character to be able to 1v1 Chewbacca and one-shot honor guards, and to be able to spam Leia and the other characters. 2, you need a character to be able to 1v1 Luke and make sure that he wastes as much time as possible on you. And you need a character that could consistently stun lock him as well. So, do keep that in mind. Emperor Palpatine is pretty much 100% a staple on every single dark side team. So, it is extremely rare to see him absent off of a team because he is also really important. Not for the same reasons that Vader and Bossk are super important, but Palpatine is really important because he can do better against Lando, and he has a decent matchup against Han Solo, and he is the best check to Luke Skywalker. He doesn't counter Luke Skywalker. In fact, in a 1v1, 80% of the time, Luke Skywalker will win the 1v1 because Force Push is retarded. But Emperor is the best check to Luke because Chain Lightning is a really good stun, and Chain Lightning can mean the difference between a Luke completely destroying your team or Luke being able to do nothing and taking 50% at the beginning of the game. So Emperor is extremely important for utility, and he is the only dark side character that drops healths. And before you say, well, Orson is a really good defensive threat as well, problem with Orson is that Orson loses even worse to Luke Skywalker. He is completely dumpstered by Lando, and if he gets disrupted in any way, he has the same problem as Emperor, in that if either of them get disrupted before they can do anything, they're completely useless. But Orson has it worse because while Emperor at least has like a decent offensive presence, Orson literally doesn't have an offensive presence, period. His offensive presence is one of the worst in the game. In fact, Orson, if you do not camp with Orson can actually potentially lose to Nyanum offensively, and he's the only character that is like that. Basically, if you were to see a 1v1 between Orson and Nyanum, it would never end. Or it should never end, because neither of them are going to push on each other. But as I said, you're genuinely going to see Emperor more, because while Emperor can be passive and his lack of damage can be a nuisance at times, the ability to give your teammates health, stun Luke, and stop soldiers, Emperor is extremely good at killing regulars, to the point where I don't even think Vader can replicate what Emperor Palpatine is able to do. So his place on most teams is not interchangeable, and Bossk is he's way too important because Greedo is really frail and is horrible in the late game because in order for Greedo to do anything, he always has to go all in, and going all in means he's going to lose all of his health. And if your Emperor has to heal himself or heal Vader, or he gets disrupted, well, Greedo is basically fucking useless in the endgame. Whereas Bossk actually has a little bit of longevity with his trait, has better damage, and he is the fastest character in the game. And he is the best defensive blaster character in the entire game, bar none. So, trying to play offensively against a Bosk who's just running around and just switching from head glitch to head glitch is really, really annoying, especially when you consider that most teams are going to be disruption E4, cooling cell E4, you're going to be hit with rocket launcher, sentries, just a bunch of bullshit. You don't want Greedo because Greedo is going to get worn down extremely fast. And even Bosk can get worn down extremely fast, but at least Bosk has a really good offensive presence and he's the best defensive character in the game. Whereas Greedo's defensive viability doesn't exist, and he basically has games where he goes and doesn't do enough damage and either gets destroyed health-wise or gets annihilated on the spot. And at that point, it's like, well, what is he good for? Dengar is decent, but the problem is that he gets absolutely dumpstered by Luke Skywalker, completely annihilated if he gets double-teamed in any way. If he goes against other bulky characters and they're at full health, they will usually win the 1v1 versus Dengar. Dengar usually cannot win versus Chewie, cannot win versus Leia, and gets annihilated by Luke. He actually doesn't get absolutely annihilated by Lando, but if he gets disrupted in front of regulars or other teammates, yeah, it's good night. So Dengar is bad because he can't break through the defensive threats of the metagame. Boba Fett is actually the only character that can be interchangeable with Bosk, but cannot be interchangeable with Vader and Emperor. If you change one of them out of your team, you are sacrificing too much for too little, because you are making yourself too weak to certain characters. So you need Vader and Emperor, so the only solution is to sacrifice Bosk. And if you do that, you'll be stronger offensively and defensively on some maps, but if you're on a hardcore camp inside Chewie map, Boba Fett is completely useless, because the reason why you would want to use Boba Fett is because of his mobility with his jetpack, and he's able to annihilate regulars, and he does extremely well against Lando in mid to close range. And he can dumpster Chewbacca, but that's assuming that Chewbacca is playing offensively, and if you're going against Coiler, then Chewbacca will never play offensively, and he will always camp indoors. So Boba Fett is usually not an option, because the camping indoors thing kind of kills his character by a significant amount. So going forward after that small little tangent, let's talk about which characters do super well on this map, at least for Rebels. Chewbacca and Lando can function defensively on this map. Usually you will not see Lando, but you will 100% see Chewbacca on this map. You can see both Chewie and Lando, but Lando will usually see 100% usage. Lando 100% usage, Lando 100% usage, Chewbacca 100% usage. Chewbacca and Lando will see 100% usage. Chewbacca 100% usage, Chewbacca and Lando 100% usage, Chewbacca and Lando 100% usage, Lando 100% usage, and Lando 100% usage. So there you go. Those are the maps where Chewbacca and Lando are on the most common, and then there are some maps where Lando is only used, but Lando could be used on every single map potentially, because he's such a significant offensive threat that you need to be prepared for him one way or another. Whereas Chewbacca on some maps, if he doesn't have a spawn that he can camp, or there isn't like an indoor section that he can just run to, then it's usually not worth using him if you're playing super defensively. I'm going to name a few maps where you either spawn in an OP camping spot or you spawn in a camping spot. Spawn next to a camping spot, spawn next to an OP camping spot, spawn in a 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 camping spot, spawn near a camping spot that leads into another camping spot. And you don't need Chewbacca on these two maps because Lando's ridiculous. And often Imperials will camp on this map because Lando is so good on these maps. Why is this significant? Well, the reason why defense, for the most part, is played to the significant extent that it is because defense is really, really easy to play compared to offense. That's just a simple answer. You don't need to develop as many strategies with defense as you do offense. Offense, you have to, you need to figure out how you're going to chip certain characters, how you're going to go in, play, like, sometimes you need to think on the spot and make a really good play immediately, whereas defense is a lot more safer. You don't need to do that. You just go inside, wait for them. If you have a team that communicates well, then you'll know the locations of certain characters. You'll have regulars that will automatically have the good offensive advantage because they will see you coming and they know exactly where you are coming from. And genuinely speaking, you don't need to strategize as much if you're on defense. Whereas offense, you do. And I'm going to be talking about Chewbacca really quick and why Chewbacca influences defense heavily. So, offensively, Chewbacca's vulnerabilities are actually really easy to exploit. For one, it is really easy for characters to chip damage Chewbacca. People have learned how to fight Chewbacca, and even though Chewbacca is a significant offensive threat in and of himself, people have had 3 years now to learn how to fight Chewbacca. And people, you will see Vader's never go in. They will force choke, saber throw, chip. Boss will head glitch you and run away if you get too close. Boba Fett's will just zone you out. Krennic's will just armor break you, take cover, armor break, take cover, armor break, put down droid, run away. Stuff like that. That's the stuff that you usually see. And on the regular side of things, regulars will head glitch, E4, jetpack away into another head glitch, and repeat the same process. Or they'll just straight up run at you, E4, jetpack away into a head glitch, and continue to E4 you more. Or they'll wait for you to try and run away, and then they'll E4 in a head glitch, and they'll jetpack to a head glitch closest to you and continue to do the same process. It's simple as that. On defense, however, almost none of that applies because, well, for one, if you're running into an enclosed area, saber throwing and force choking is way harder to do because, well, Chewbacca's teammates aren't just going to allow a Vader to just fucking run indoors and then just chip the Chewbacca. No, that you will almost never see that happen. That just is not how games are played. If a Vader is caught, or he pushes too early, or he doesn't inform his team where he's going, it is very possible that Vader can get overwhelmed, and when he tries to back off, you have characters that will, like Luke, they'll just be like, nope, you aren't going anywhere. You can't run away, and if you target me, Chewbacca's going to shoot you in the back. If you target my Chewbacca, I'm going to spam you in the back. It's as simple as that. Leia can Trooper Bane and slow Vader down and break his block. Lando can disrupt Vader, which is absolutely horrible for Vader because Vader's main source of chip in the 1v1 against Chewbacca indoors is Heavy Strike, and taking away Heavy Strike basically means that Vader either has to run away, and as we stated, running away can be difficult because there are even Han Solo can take advantage of Vader running away because of Lucky Shot, Rapid Fire in the back. Even if you're at max trait or you have armor upgrade, eating a entire Rapid Fire from Han Solo in the back is like 40 to 50%. You don't want to eat that. That is absolutely horrible. Not even to mention Mighty War, which will boost Han Solo's damage even further. So, yeah, usually if you go all in versus a camping Chewie, you have to go all in. And basically, the 1v1 between those two is the most important part of the game, period. The entire meta of HVV is defined between the 1v1, or the 1v1 between Vader and Chewbacca. Those two characters will fight each other. It is going to happen, and it has to happen. for your game to go anywhere. And hence why Vader sees 100% usage, because Vader is the only character bulky enough to go against Chewbacca, and he is the only character that could significantly chip Chewbacca. So, it is really important. However, we haven't really even discussed much about Chewbacca's trait, because Chewbacca's trait heavily dictates whether which characters can fight him or not. At max trait, no character beats Chewbacca at full health. At full health, max trait, Mighty War Chewbacca beats everybody. Not even Vader can beat that. No character ever won. Even trait 2. Trait 2, Mighty War, let's say 70 or 60% Chewbacca, will always beat Bosk indoors, will always beat Dengar, he will beat every character in the 1v1. Even at 30%, if he even has one of his abilities, Bosk is getting, like, significantly chunked. So is Emperor. Actually, Dengar excels at that sort of 1v1 the most, but even still, if Dengar's eating a lot of damage, it is entirely possible that, unless if soldiers plus another hero are ganking Chewbacca can still kill Dengar, because on top of having massive amounts of damage, and he's completely removing the majority of his checks outside of Darth Vader, then it's entirely possible that Chewbacca can just tank everything and just completely destroy Dengar. And at that point, it really depends how much trait and health Dengar has as well, and the abilities. Like, Dengar, as I said, is really inconsistent, and that's the part of the game that matters the most to Dengar. But as I said, if Dengar never reaches that part of the game, then Dengar is complete dog shit, and he's really bad. So, and realize that I just brought up the idea that unless if you spend the whole game chipping Chewbacca, which you have to do, you have to chip Chewbacca, because no character besides Darth Vader will beat Chewbacca indoors in the 1v1. Bosk will always lose, pretty much, unless if he has massive team support and Chewbacca's abilities are down. If Chewbacca's at 50%, you don't even necessarily need trait. You just need one of your abilities, and Bosk is toast if he doesn't have team support. In the 1v1, Bosk, without team support, will almost always lose to Chewbacca 100%. That's how good Chewbacca is. The only way that Chewbacca will lose is if he has no abilities and no trait, period. But even if he has, like, multi-bolts, Bosk is in trouble, because even if you manage to kill a 50% Chewie, it is very likely that Bosk will be brought down to 50 or even 40%. It is really common for that to happen. And if Chewbacca can do that at 50%, imagine what a full health Chewbacca can do against Bosk. Yeah, now you're looking at a fight that is almost impossible for Bosk without any sort of team support. Emperor is a joke. Emperor's DPS is so bad that unless if Chewbacca's teammates go out of their way to completely fuck him up the ass, Emperor will never beat Chewbacca indoors in a 1v1. At most, Emperor will chip Chewbacca for like 30 or 40 of his health at the most, and then that will become irrelevant because Chewbacca's Leia is just going to heal him back to 90 or full, and then now your Emperor is dead, and now Chewbacca's back to full, and now you're back at square one. Boba Fett, as I said, cannot 1v1 Chewbacca indoors without team support. In a 1v1, I think you guys get the point. No character 1v1s Chewbacca indoors. None. The only character that does that is Vader, and like I said earlier, high levels of trait plus team support can completely annihilate Vader. So, the game plan of beating Chewbacca is to gank him. 100%. That is the most consistent way of killing Chewbacca. You need to 100% double team him. If you do not double team Chewbacca, it's almost equivalent to throwing the game. You need to double team him. Because if you don't double team him, well, his regulars and his other heroes are going to take advantage of that. And believe me, they will take advantage of that if you are facing somebody like Coiler or Labyrinth. That will 100% be taken advantage of. And how do they take advantage of it? Well, as I stated before, Lando can disrupt Vader and just take his ability to heavy strike away from him. Luke Skywalker can just come up behind him and be like, oh, okay, well, we're doing this now. And add on to the fact that Chewbacca necessarily doesn't even need to Mighty Roar to get trait 3 armor, because if Leia is at high levels of trait, she's going to be giving Chewbacca high armor anyway. So Chewbacca, in most games, is going to be tanking insane amounts of damage because he's always going to be in close proximity to Leia. So you don't, as I said, he doesn't need Mighty Roar to be a threat. If he just has Leia near him, he's always going to be an offensive threat indoors. But I think you guys get the point. Chewbacca is a major threat in those teams, and if you do not play around Chewbacca appropriately, Chewbacca will absolutely obliterate you. And now we need to talk about Lando, because Lando is he is a bigger threat than Chewbacca, 100%. The reason for this is that Lando has a property that is completely unique to him, and that he can completely stealth off the map. Now, yes, you can trigger his trap, but the thing is that that's not permanent, especially if Lando already has his trap up. If you just trigger it, he'll just throw it down again, and then, well, now you're back at square one. But it's not just the stealth that makes Lando absolutely annoying, it's his damage output and disruption. Disruption, I think, by itself has resulted in me losing more games with Emperor Palpatine than any other ability ever has. Not even Power Blast has completely fucked me on that end, even though Power Blast is Lando's best ability and is the whole reason why most people play Lando. Disruption kills certain characters so badly, as I stated before. Like, Emperor just gets completely dumpstered if you get disrupted immediately. So does Krennic. And the reason for this is that there is a glitch in the game where the higher trait that Lando has, the larger his disruption radius is. So let's say that he Power Blasts somebody, or he Power Blasts regulars. He's now in trait 1. Now his radius of his disruption is going to be larger than it is in his base trait. And if he's at trait 2, then he's pretty much guaranteed to disrupt you if there isn't like an environmental thing blocking him, right? And believe me, characters being unable to use their abilities is absolutely massive against characters like Luke and Chewbacca. So disruption is a really big deal. Lando is also the only other character except 9 of them that's able to super roll. And what super roll is it's basically when you combat roll, but you go flying across the map, or you go flying in a significant amount of speed into another direction. So it basically is a get out of jail free card that can only really be interrupted by Vader. Because Emperor, it's super inconsistent. And so is Boba. Because if Boba Fett's already on Lando, then that's assuming that there isn't a Han Solo or Luke pressuring you. And Luke and Lando are usually paired together on the bigger maps 100% of the time. So Boba Fett being able to pressure Lando is way, way, way harder than you think it is. And even so, like I said, if you're being pressured by Luke or Leia, Lando gets a super roll away, and since you're fighting them, Lando can just now turn around and power blast you, and now you're dead. Or Lando can pressure a teammate that's low on health, and now he's dead. And we haven't even really talked about Power Blast yet. Power Blast is an absolutely ridiculous ability. It is the highest damaging ability in the whole game, by far. It is actually possible for Lando to one-shot characters with just one Power Blast. It is physically possible for that to happen. If you know how to use the Power Blast correctly, characters will just straight up get one-shotted. And Power Blast lasts so long that it's sometimes hard to judge whether if Power Blast is finished or not. You could think that Power Blast is finished and you'll only take 20%, but then it's not, and then they do double shot, and then all of a sudden, well, you just lost 70% of your health. Or the Lando can, let's say that you're about to go into cover, and Lando knows that. He can just cancel his power blast and just grab an easy 30%, which is the equivalent of a lucky shot, or 40% if you're a frail character like Bosk. So that's actually better than lucky shot, because lucky shot you can only get 25%. Lando can consistently grab 40, maybe even 50% off of a cancel. And you don't even need to cancel it. If you use the whole thing, there is a really good chance that you can insta-kill a character, even like Vader. I mean, it's really, really, really difficult to insta-kill Vader, but there is a really, I would say it's like 3% chance at like trait 2 that you can insta-kill a Darth Vader with one Power Blast. This is under the assumption that the Vader is also blocking, which lowers the percentage to, I would say, like 0.5%. So, yeah, it is extremely, extremely rare, but Vader can get one-hit KO'd by Lando. And even though that Vader is one of Lando's best counters, even Vader does not want to eat a Power Blast, because Vader losing 30-40% of his health, that means that he's not going to be able to shrug off rocket launchers or thermal imploders now, because that's now automatically taking him the 30%. Luke, remember, you cannot completely block Force Push, and that's doing like I would say 5 to 10% if you block it. If you don't block it, you're looking at 20%. But if you block it, it's still doing 5, 7, 10% chip. So you're going to 50 to 40% now. So, or 60 to 50. That is now you can no longer 1v1 Chewbacca. Chewbacca will now win the 1v1 100%. And that's just on the bulkiest target in the game. Emperor, although usually you don't want to Power Blast Emperor at the beginning of the game because he'll just heal himself. Emperor gets chunked pretty hard by a Power Blast cancel. You're looking at 30 to 40%. Bosk is probably the biggest victim to Lando Calrissian. Bosk is the character that often gets fucked the most by Lando. Power Blast cancels can actually do up to 70% to Bosk in the early game. And if you have high amounts of trait and you decide not to cancel it early, and you land all of your Power Blasts, Bosk is often the character that gets insta-killed the most by Lando. It can happen to Emperor, but oftentimes you will see Bosks get significantly chunked by Lando. And Bosks and Vader are often the primary target for Lando, because with Emperor, all you really need to do to kill Emperor's momentum is just to lure him to your team and then disrupt him, just have a well-timed disruption, and now Emperor is just completely dead on open maps. Like, if Emperor gets disrupted on Sulfur Fields, he's going to die. Same with Dune Sea, same with Imperial Hangar. He will get dumpstered on Goes and Badlands and these two maps if he gets disrupted. So, on the more indoor maps, it's not as big of an issue because you don't need to maneuver as much, but it's still really, really annoying if you get disrupted as Emperor. It will definitely make the late game harder because you have to wait on an additional 30 seconds to heal a teammate. And there are times where like your teammate is so low that if you don't give them a health immediately, they'll just die to chip damage. So Emperor being disrupted is extremely important. And I'm not saying that Lando won't power blast Emperor. In fact, not power blasting Emperor is actually really bad for you because you need the pressure Emperor. But usually the targets that you want to hit the most are Darth Vader and Bosk. Because chunking them while they're being pressured by your teammates is going to have more of an impact than pressuring Emperor because, yeah, Bosk is really fast, but Bosk doesn't have a dash move that can dash him into cover or to dash him to an area that can be difficult for characters outside of Luke to get to. Luke doesn't usually care. Um, Usually doesn't because he's so fast and he can also just follow Emperor 100%. Lando usually doesn't want to follow a dashing Emperor if his teammates are nearby. So usually you won't see that happen. And Chewbacca is too slow to keep up with Emperor anyway. So yeah, in a team fight, chunking Vader is definitely way more significant because Vader is very slow and can easily be chip damage and can easily be forced to fight. Bosk, he can't. He's really fast, but because Bosk is frailer than Emperor and Vader, it's a lot easier to chip damage him. Therefore, him getting power blasts and subsequently either rocket launched or chipped additionally by regulars or whatever. If Bosk gets a power blast plus a high damaging ability, Bosk is likely not coming back from that. That is something that Bosk will usually not come back from. So Lando is extremely important when it comes to offensive pressure. And we're just talking about the two most significant threats in the metagame, Chewbacca and Lando, the ones that influence why camping is good and why camping isn't good. I'm now going to talk about the other threats in the metagame, which are a huge deal. Luke and Leia, which are the other two characters that are a part of the metagame. Luke is usually interchangeable, but Luke is also a massive threat because Luke does really well against Bosk sometimes. Other times, Bosk can win the 1v1 easily. It really depends. It can go either way, but usually Luke will have the edge over Bosk because unless if you have like really, really good reflexes and really good aim all the time, which is not going to happen all the time. No one is perfect. Human error does exist. So Bosks will often be forced to eat a heavy strike and very often have to eat several force pushes throughout the game. And force push on Bosk hurts a lot. You could be looking at 20% minimum, and at maximum you could be looking at 35, maybe even 40%. That's absolutely massive. That's higher than most power blast ranges sometimes. That's really big on Bosk. So Luke and Bosk isn't the only target that that can be threatening to Luke. Luke threatens every character in the metagame. He threatens Vader. He threatens Emperor. He threatens Emperor really badly because in a 1v1, Emperor will lose to Luke Skywalker. Luke doesn't threaten Greedo as bad as Bosk, funny enough, because Greedo has the DPS, has higher DPS than Bosk, and has a stun, and has the radar sensibility, so you could actually see Luke coming before before the fight even starts. So Greedo actually has a better matchup against Luke Skywalker than Bosk on the technicality. That doesn't make Greedo good, but Greedo has an advantage over Bosk in that department offensively. Dengar can also do kind of well against Luke, though it's usually in team fight scenarios because Dengar has two abilities that interrupt Heavy Strike and his dash, and two abilities that can prevent Luke Skywalker from running away. But in the 1v1, Luke Skywalker absolutely dumpsters Dengar, and while Explosive Rush hurts, Dengar outside of Explosive Rush does not have the DPS to kill Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker completely ignores armor, so Dengar's trait isn't even a factor. Boba Fett is significantly threatened by Luke because Luke can spam out of the sky and completely prevent him from using his main ability, which is his jetpack. And Force Push is even worse against Boba Fett because those damage ranges that could potentially absolutely kill a Bosk, those 40% ranges are actually more common on Boba Fett's because of the way how the jetpack works and the way how double stack force pushing works. Boba Fett will often get significantly chunked by force push. So Boba Fett is probably the character that is threatened the most by Luke Skywalker, at least immediately. Throughout the game and throughout the late game, Emperor and Boss can be threatened by Luke pretty badly, but Luke does have exploitable weaknesses, and Luke isn't always consistent, because Luke is a character that takes a good amount of skill to play, and you need a certain amount of knowledge to know how to play him. Any sort of mistake on your part will usually lead to Luke Skywalker dying instantly, because Luke, unlike Darth Vader, can actually get stunned in place, and if you get stunned, well, goodbye Luke Skywalker, goodbye the majority of your health. Certainly say goodbye to your offensive pressure. And then you have Leia, who is extremely tanky, has honor guards, meaning that that you have two high damaging mini heroes that can pull out rocket launchers that do up to 30 to 20% each, and D817s that can insta-melt characters like Bosk and Emperor. On top of the fact that it enables the TL50 glitch, which is the most threatening form of damage in the entire game. Leia is pretty much a centerpiece of TL50 glitch teams. So whenever you see TL50 glitchers, or you go against TL50 glitchers, Leia will be seen 100% of the time. But on most offensive teams, Leia is going to be seen 100% of the time anyway, because outside of being tanky, she can give her teammates armor because of her armor trait. And she doesn't have the best DPS in the game, but her DPS should not be underestimated. Leia can beat Bosk in a 1v1. Leia can even beat Vader if he's at low health. And Leia can sometimes beat Emperor, but I'm under the opinion that the 1v1 between Emperor and Leia is dead even. Leia heavily threatens characters like Boba Fett, because Leia can actually tank Boba Fett's hits and dish out enough damage and just tank all of his damage. Meanwhile, she can heal herself in a 1v1, so most Boba Fetts usually don't want a 1v1 a Leia for the most part. Dengar actually has a decent matchup against Leia, because Leia doesn't have the ridiculous DPS that most other characters have. But if you go against a really good Leia that has really good aim and is expecting the explosive rush, Leia can beat Dengar very easily, especially if she has high levels of trait. Greedo as well could easily be beaten by Leia, not just because of Trooper Bane critical hits. That's another thing I didn't mention. Lando is not the only character that could critical hit you. As I mentioned before, Luke Skywalker can get crits, although it's usually only off of one ability. But Trooper Bane can also crit you, and Trooper Bane is usually doing, I think, 8% each time you get shot. But if you get crit, you're looking up to 15, maybe even 20%. That's really huge. Being crit by Trooper Bane is really nasty. And as I said before, Leia can spawn the honor guards, so you might have an early advantage in a 1v1 against Leia as maybe like Emperor, and then her honor guards spawn, and it's just like, oh shit, I can't 1v1 her no more. I gotta run the fuck away, because you can't target Leia and the honor guards at the same time. And due to the nature of how Force Lightning works, well, guess what? Honor guards are just gonna fucking shred you if the stun doesn't go through. So there's that. But I think I went over the most significant threats that you're going to be facing on light side defense. I will briefly talk about which maps dark side defense are really good on, so I will mention those here. Dark side defensively on this map is godlike. Dark side on this map can be good, but is often ruined by orbital RNG. This map is godlike defense for Imperials. This map is decent defensively for Imperials. In fact, it's actually bad offensively for Imperials because this is the best Rebel defense map in the game. This map is extremely annoying to fight Imperial defense on. Imperial defense on this map is also a nuisance because of Bosk. Imperial nuisance on this map, defense on this map is pretty bad. Imperial defense on this map is almost required because early game Lando will shred Darth Vader, make it impossible for him to do anything. Imperial defense on this map is irrelevant because, well, you don't even need to camp on this map because it's the best Imperial map offensively anyway, so why would you camp on it? Doesn't really make much sense. Ghosted Badlands is a underrated camping Imperial map because the Imperials actually spawn right next to a camping spot the Rebels want to camp in. So there might even be games where you will see Coiler and them run the camp into the caves, and then Labyrinth's team is camping right outside their door, and then it just becomes a game of who's going to push on who and who gets bored first. I'm not kidding. I guarantee games like that actually exist. If you do some research and looking around on YouTube, I guarantee you might actually find a game where the game is decided who decides to push first, aka which team gets bored of camping first. Imperial defense on this map isn't great, but you often need to play defensively on this map to do anything. And defense on this map is horrible because you're forced to camp a rock, basically, and the light side can basically make it to where you are camping all game, and they can make it to where you can't do anything all game except chip people to death with Bosk and Orson. And if you're using Orson, well, your offensive capabilities are way worse, especially if you're using him alongside Bosk, because that means you're either not using Emperor or you're not using Vader, and you can't not use Vader, so you're not going to use Emperor, and not using Emperor is a massive deal. So, yeah, Imperial defense in this map is not great, but there are games that I've seen where Imperials will have to camp on this map. And it often doesn't go well because this is a God Lando map, and trying to camp on a really open map against Lando is extremely difficult, especially when you consider that the amount of mind game potential Lando has in an open, super happy map. It's really, really difficult to 100% eliminate every probability of where Lando can be. Even if you have people scan pulse and scout binoculars, it is pretty unrealistic to see an entire team use it. Usually you only see one or two people use it, and even then, that doesn't account for getting trooper baned by Leia, reg hunted by Luke, killed by camping regulars, or just killed by Lando and unable to mark them. So, yeah, that map isn't amazing for Imperial defense, but yeah, that is that. So I think that's like the gist of it. I don't really have much more to say on it. Of course, I didn't talk about these maps because these maps are awful and bad, and if you play them in scrims, then I absolutely hate you. But other than that, I think I said everything that I need to say. Yeah, I pretty much just laid out the reasons why light side plays defense 100% of the time. So yeah, that's that. I will probably be making more videos like this in the future. I just don't know when. This will probably be going up today or tomorrow, whenever it's going to go up. But anyway, yeah, that is that.